right, so welcome everyone who are here, all 40 of you. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to UBI's first ever online workshop series. To those who aren't familiar with UBI is short for Urban Biodiversity Initiative. So UBI is an independent collective for urban ecology research, conservation, and environmental education based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. My name is Shuhada, but you call me Shu can already lah. I'll be moderating the talk for all 4 series, so you'll be seeing a lot of my face. Before we start, I humbly, actually I wanted to say this now. I think so, no, I mean, everyone's already on mute, so okay lah, tak perlu remind anyone on that. If throughout the session you have any questions, just drop your questions in the chat or Q&A box. If you all want to sembang-sembang in the chat, also can. But stick to the topic lah. Later you all sembang, kopi o lah, membawang lah, all that kind of lah. Okay, so let's go on to our agenda for today. I'll be introducing our talk and our guest. This online workshop series is organized with the Kota Damansara Community Forest Society and with funding from the Habitat Foundation and the UNDP EF Small Grant, which aims to develop knowledge and skills among urban communities that want to conserve, improve, and also manage green spaces in the city. So throughout the month of July, we will be running online workshops on various topics related to rewilding urban areas. So like one of the reasons why we focus on this area is that we see that urban gardens can be a really good habitat for biodiversity if it is managed properly. Because like, having that is way better than having lawns, flat. So one of the ways to look into this aspect is through urban farming, which is our title or theme for today's talk. Joining us today is Ms Low Shao-Lyn from Eat, Shoot and Root. Pendekkan easy to say ESR lah. As today she will be sharing with us techniques on how to establish an edible garden in your own tropical living space. So Shao-Lyn has been in the design industry for over 14 years. So imagine 14 years ago, what were you doing? And imagine what Shao-Lyn was doing at that time. Alright, so Shao-Lyn has been working on a range of corporate, educational, and government-based projects. After a few years after completing her master's in graphic design from the University of the Creative Arts UK, she discovered permaculture known as Embun Pagi, and by how our high level of dependency on others for basic necessities. So then she went on to co-found Eat, Shoot and Root in 2012 with the aim of I think so it's more than that, is it? Edible garden. And then also organized more than 100 edible gardening workshops and also sold over 19,000 edible garden products with all the essence of educating people about their relationship with through the most Malaysian way possible, food. Alright, so that is all from me. I'll be passing the stage to Shao-Lyn. So Shao-Lyn, whenever you are ready, go ahead.
Thanks for the introduction, Shu. So I think that pretty much sums up the summary of what I've been doing for the past 14 years. So like Shu said, I started off actually in graphic design and I moved on into garden design and agriculture in that sense over the past 8 years. And I'll be sharing today everything that we've been doing for the past 8 years. And I will be having a deck, which I'll be sharing my screen soon. I hope that everyone can see the screen. I'll be taking you through the journey. You give me a second while I look for my screenshot, which is here. Sorry, there's some different screens going on, but I will be taking you through a deck. Shuhada is already on mute. Okay, so thanks so much again for waiting. My sharing screen is starting now. Okay, so hopefully you all can see the screen. Okay, so basically when we started, this was the space that I was exposed to that Shuhada was talking about in Batu Arang, and it was like a 3/4 of an acre site. I was visiting my friend called Sabina at that time, and she was bringing us through her site, which is this permaculture site where they were trying to grow different types of food, also educate people in the process. They were here for about 2 years, and when I came in, they were just about to move to an urban site. Because a lot of people that came for the courses here in a rural area, trying to learn about agriculture, it was really great. But at the end of the day, this would be the kind of space that we all kind of lived in. Well, most of us live in today's world now. Most of us are living in urban spaces. I live in an urban space. This is actually a picture of where I'm living right now. So how do we actually bring the rural concept of agriculture into an urban space? That was the challenge that we all felt was very important to address. So with my journey, I actually started growing a couple of things from the balcony. I had never grown anything before in my life. I was never exposed to gardening, but I felt that there was definitely this disconnect. So I tried growing these melon seeds. I'm sure plenty of people have grown them before from their leftover melons, but this 8 years ago was my first time. And I started documenting how I was growing and started looking for more information as well on how to grow, because a lot of the information that I found was actually very European based, and a lot of it was not really applicable here in Malaysia in our kind of climate lah. So this was an initial experiment. What I did was I took a couple of rain gutters that I found at the side, started growing as many things as possible. And there were things growing in here like sweet potato leaf. There was also a lot of pucuk ubi growing at that time. There was Thai basil, there was daun kosong. So I was just exploring with growing in a really small space on my own personal journey lah, because learning about this, you can read as much as you want, but until you actually do it and work it with your hands, that would be the way to learn. I also then went to volunteer on a farm in Portugal, and I looked at a couple of spaces in Europe. At that time, woofing, which is worldwide organic farming, well, where you go and volunteer on people's farms, that was one of the ways to learn how to farm. And so I went to a couple of spaces in Portugal, and they were doing very interesting things. They were growing pomegranate trees, figs. They also were doing all these like compost heaps. If you see at the top right corner of the screen, the middle one was sort of like a pig farm that I went to explore in London lah, because I wanted to see how people actually rear livestock as well. And this was just like a foray into agriculture, how agriculture was done elsewhere, and it was all very interesting. And it was fun to see that in London itself, they have actually a big network of urban farms, and they even had a map at that time where they had a network of urban farms listed. So they had even donkeys in the city lah, and you can see here they had places that had guinea pigs, and they had chickens and all sorts of things in different spaces in London. So of course, then at that time in KL, 8 years ago, this really wasn't very happening in KL, because people saw farming as something that was kind of kampongi or backward. It wasn't seen as something that wasn't seen as something that people wanted to do in the city. But of course, I felt that it was still really important to reconnect, because having grown up in the city all my life, this was something that we never had experience of. So when I came back to KL, and I got in touch with Sabina again, who was the lady who was in charge of Embun Pagi. She had asked me to start something in the city. So then we managed to find a space, and this was in Bukit Gasing, which is not too far off from where Ubi is. And we managed to find a space which was just a simple single-story bungalow house but luckily with a lot of land around the house. So we were like, okay, let's try to experiment here, because at that time there weren't any like examples of urban gardening projects in town. There wasn't also anybody that we could look up to. So we figured, okay, we just had to do it ourselves. And when we started it, we did it with very little funding. We knew that we didn't want to set up as a charity. We knew that we wanted to keep it as a self-sustaining project. So from the beginning, we planned to make it into a social enterprise, in a way, like if we could offer services or products to then fund the project, that would be the way that we would continue the project, keep it going basically. So this was the first demo site that we started. And we had really grand plans for the space. We wanted to fill it up completely with vegetables, with different kinds of trees, fruit trees, aquaponic systems. As you can see in this picture, there were a lot of elements that we had designed in the space. And we were here for a good 6 years, and we made it work. We planned this out and we implemented bit by bit. We managed to get friends to help. We got a couple of volunteers, and every time we ran a workshop, we charged for the workshop and the workshop would pay for the materials. So that was how we kept that project going. And I'm going to show you a video, because I think the video kind of encapsulates the essence of that project the most. And we were there for 6 years lah, so that was a pretty long time. I'm going to mute it. So if you can see here, this was the beginning of this project. And again, that's the screenshot earlier. And this was what it looked like before. And that was maybe like a couple of years later, we started growing a lot of different things. And at that time, we just wanted to pack it in, grow as much as possible. Again, we were doing this on very low budget, using a lot of recycled materials. As you can see, tires. And this was a picture of one of the workshops that we did, getting volunteers in. And we wanted to really try to see how far we could get with this project. And we made our own pizza oven using materials from around the neighborhood. We would collect leaves, clay from around the garden, and to turn it into other things. This is Beatrice, one of my partners later on, and that is me a long time ago. And that was typically how we set up the garden and the kinds of things that we would have to do to maintain it as well. And at that time, there was only 2 of us plus volunteers, and it was a whole lot of work. And we learned a lot during that time. We grew a lot during that time. So if you can see here, we grew like brinjal, eggplant, a lot of different things that we experimented with. But I must say that it was very tiring because of the way we had done it. It could have been way more organized, but I guess that was the way we learned lah. But that was the exploration into our journey in urban gardening and urban farming. Often when people talk about urban farming is actually, the concept itself is very big scale. But for us, we started on a very small scale at a time, because there's only so much we can handle at a time. So it was really fun, this project. I'll fast forward a bit now, because it went on for a good 6 years. And finally, after that, we decided to expand. How we funded this project was also the space. Part of it we would share with other entities in the space, so that could pay for the space. So if you're growing in an urban setting, I think your highest cost would actually be paying your rent or your landlord. So if you have to do that, it may not be very viable to grow in an urban space, because land prices are just really expensive. Whereas if you can get access to land for free or very little, then only it will be worth doing lah. So this is just us washing lovely vegetables where we were cutting them and harvesting them lah. People always like to see the cooking and the growing part of it. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. And so this is also how we moved on in our journey. You know, we started giving services. We started teaching other people as well. We started coming up with our own educational materials. And we started coming out with kits, because we realized that, okay, people love to grow, but they may not be able to find the right materials, or they don't know how to start. So coming from a design background, that was how I utilized my knowledge to enable people to understand how to grow things easily by, well, designing comms and designing communication materials to do it. So this is a very good example of how we tried to implement something in an urban setting instead. This is a picture of a compost heap that we did from the very beginning, which is a massive pile of leaves and waste from the garden, right? So if you were to implement this in an urban space, which we did when we went gassing, our neighbors were completely upset with us because they were thinking that it's so dirty lah, and they had no appreciation whatsoever for us in growing all these things that we were doing. So with knowing this in mind, we started translating things into an urban context. So this is one of our most recent designs, so to speak, which is a compost bin. And we translated something like from this, and we sort of eked it out to design something that was more for an urban space, which was a compost bin like this, basically. And this is something that's more palatable, more manageable for an urban space because you don't see everything coming out. It has a lid so you can keep rats out, and it's more organized. So when urbanites see this, they're a bit more compelled to do composting compared to the previous large compost heap. So there are concepts and things that we took along the way, and we translated it into an urban context, and it's worked so far for everyone that we've been talking to. People who have been following us for a long time. They've been, so far, some of them, like in the beginning, they're like, they don't have a space and they're a bit scared of farming, but slowly when they see that it can be done in a space like theirs, then they followed us on this journey. So we've done things like growing in smaller containers as well. This is an example of how microgreens can grow. So if you're living in an urban space, most likely if you're in an apartment, you won't have enough space to grow large vegetable beds. So microgreens is something that you can do because you can just grow it in a small plate and you don't need a lot of sunlight, and you can harvest it within 2 weeks. So these are examples of small little garden elements that you can have at home. This is a picture of one of our participants wearing a t-shirt which is kind of funny our Sayo t-shirt, because we try to promote local vegetables as well. But on the side, you can see the different kind of planter boxes that we've also come up and devised over the years, because if you looked at the gassing videos earlier on, they were very wild, they were very organic, which is not wrong. It was just a bit more hard to manage. So these days, the way we do gardens is we manage it in spaces so that we know what's growing and we can decide what to prune, what to chop, or what to harvest, and it's easier to manage. So if you're starting an urban farm or an edible garden at home, which I will later cover as well, organizing it in a way for you to be able to manage it later on is also very important. So these are just some examples of stuff that we've come up with over the years. This is a recent product of a planter box. You can think of different ways of containing soil and doing gardens. It doesn't have to be so typically a clay pot or a poly bag. It can be very many different items that you can use. These are some of examples of workshops that we've run. Kids come to the space, they play with chickens. And we like highlighting our chickens because chickens are also an aspect of urban farming that can be implemented. Some participants have said that, chickens are outlawed and the council will be very angry if you have chickens. But for us, we haven't had like a lot of chickens. At most, we would have 4 chickens at a time. And it's nice because then you get eggs every day or every other day. Currently, the chickens in our space have been laying eggs, but they've been hatching the eggs as well. So then we've had a lack of edible eggs. They've kind of been hatching the chicks. So, but chickens again are something nice that you can implement in your urban space if you don't have too many lah. So this is an example of Cheryl Samad and her husband. This is a garden that we built for her as well. So many different things that you can do. I just take you through the range of things that we do, which is we try to encourage people to do and set up edible gardens. And urban farming is another level of edible gardening because you start small and it's called a garden. And then later on, when you expand, then you can call it a farm when it goes commercial. So I'll be bringing you through a couple of case studies where we've done that. This is an example of Diane's garden, which we've done with these raised planter beds. So when you're doing or setting up your own garden or an urban farm, you definitely need to make sure that you have enough soil. And the way that we do it is we install these large garden beds, and we like them to be large because then they can share resources. And when you water the garden, the water at least will be shared amongst many plants, rather than if you have a small pot and a small pot and you have many small pots, you have to water it one by one. So we like bigger beds because it's just easier to maintain. So this is just an example of things that they've grown. They've grown many things in these containers, from bananas, as you can see, to ginger, long beans, eggplant, and they've explored that. So that's a home garden that you can do quite easily. And moving on, then this is an educational garden. So this is a garden here at our current space. So the backdrop behind me is actually, this is our current space, which is a house with a daycare center as well. So it's a Montessori preschool, and we have designed an edible garden with it. So this is a picture of the house from the other side. This was when we first moved in. We had just moved out from the gassing space. That was a very small space. And here we were like really happy to be able to find this space in the urban setting. This is just in Bukit Damansara, so not very far. The MRT is 5 minutes away. But very lucky to find this space because it's very, very large for an urban space like this. So when we started here, we could start all over again and we could redesign the space again. We decided to do everything in containers and decided to do everything in a very organized manner so that we could harvest easier. So this is a material that we use. It was fiber cement beds that we cut and we organized it, and we wanted to have different plants in different beds because it was supposed to be an educational garden. So when we're growing here, we can't grow all just one crop. We have to grow many different crops because we want to educate people about it, right? So if we grow one crop, then it'll be okay lah, not very educational. So we decided to grow many different crops, and this is how it looked like maybe about a year and a half ago. So it's boomed since, and it will come and go. This was not in its best stage. It's still growing. And when you're growing edible plants, you need to make sure that you have enough maintenance, because after that, when the plants die off, you still need to take care of them. But I will be bringing you through some slides later on as well. But yeah, so then we have this daycare and kids play in the space. We've got different elements. We've got a vegetable bed. We've got compost base. Because when you start an urban farm or an edible garden, you need to have these things in place. Composting is a big element, which I will touch on a bit later. And also here you can see that we've got the veggie beds at the bottom, and for us, we try to get the kids involved lah. So then sometimes when we have school holiday workshops, they're the ones who do the hard labor. So if you have kids, it'll be great if you can get them to work on the garden, because you know they like digging, and for some reason they just like playing with mud. So that was a great combination of how we could utilize this space well. So this is an example of a school garden, and this is done in Subang Jaya in Sri KL School. And this is quite a different project because they had large space as well. What had happened is there was a tree that fell over, created a small mini landslide, so to speak, and they decided to turn this landslide into a garden. So when we were brought in by the architects, C Arch, that was working on the project, we were brought in as the edible garden consultants, and we tried to help them plan the space out. So with this space, we planned different zones for different things. So if you have a very large space at home, you can do this as well. You can have different things grow in different areas so that you can manage them better. Sometimes if you look at permaculture books, or if you look at permaculture, or you read up permaculture work, the general thought is that you grow a lot of different things and you try to merge things so that you can maximize it as much as possible. But for us, we've tried that method and we realized that you can do that, but it may make things very hard to harvest later on. You really need to spend time to make sure that you know where things are growing. So instead of doing the typical permaculture method, we have decided to zone things out so that it's easier to manage now. So this is what it looks like, or this is what it looked like when we started it. I haven't gone back in a year plus, I must say. So they've got different things growing on different levels, and it's thriving really well. The teachers are supposed to help manage it, but ideally the students are the ones that manage it lah. So the gardener is also very important. So the gardener takes care of this quite a bit as well. And this is just a teacher workshop in action. So if you're doing a school garden, which some people are quite interested in, teachers are a very important element, and they will be the caretakers of the garden if they have time. If they don't have time, then the gardener is the most important person as well. So just taking through a few more examples and case studies. This is one that we did in Clearwater Building that is based on the 26th floor, I think 19th or 26th floor. And we did the same thing, raised beds. They wanted to grow a lot of Japanese vegetables. We tried it out on the ground floor. They did well. But then once we brought it to the highest rooftop floor, they didn't do so well. So when you're growing also, you need to make sure that you grow the right thing. If you're growing in a different space, sometimes the climate can change very slightly, but it makes a lot of difference on the plants. So this is something that you have to take care of lah, which I will take you through also. This is a developer garden that we worked a garden for a developer that we worked with. We worked with Gamuda Land, and this was for Kundang Estates. If you're a developer attending this talk, this is a good case study because when they started this, they didn't have a community yet. So we had to be the ones to manage the garden. So we managed the garden for 2 years before handing it over to the community. And now it's handed over to the community. They are the ones who are supposed to take care of it. So when we started, they stripped the land bare and we had to start from scratch. So there were no trees. We had to grow this from scratch. The landscape architect had already designed the garden widths. So we went in, we planned the gardens out, and we also worked with the developers. So we can see here some of the colleagues in this picture are actually staff from Gamuda Land itself, and they were really nice enough to be part of this project. And this is the after photo, which is a very nice photo, not photoshopped at all, maybe a bit of contrast or brightness, but this is what it looks like after. So this case study is meant to say that actually you can grow anywhere. To me, you can rehabilitate any space if you have the right materials, but most importantly, you need to commit the manpower and the time and the effort and the people. The people element is actually the most important now. So sometimes we get people who come to us and say, oh, we've got this piece of land, can you work it? But we don't really have time to work on so many pieces of land. So it's important to get a community together that will commit to a space and to work the land properly. So we can grow a lot of different things. These are some examples of stuff that we grew over those 2 years. There's like roselle, and there was like ayu mata pengantin also. A lot of marigold. But we wanted to grow flowers because the flowers would help to increase biodiversity in the area, which Ubi can talk to you more about later on. And also attract different bugs, like predator bugs, and also repel certain bugs. So when you're having a urban farm or an edible garden, it's important to have diversity so that if you have one crop only, it might get eaten by all the pests, but if you have many different things, they'll get distracted and they won't devour everything. At least you will still have some backup plants in that way. So this project is the biggest project that we've worked on. And this I would consider an urban farm lah. The ones before that, they were considered more garden spaces. And this project, we worked together with Think City and Citibank Foundation. We were lucky because they were willing to fund the project. We were willing to work on the project, and there was also a community that was willing to commit to the project. So with a big space, you really need a lot of manpower and people behind it. So this I would consider a project that takes about 30 humans at a time, because YWCA, their space is actually a vocational training center where they have underprivileged girls from underprivileged backgrounds who come in, who learn about culinary arts. So when they learn how to cook and bake, this garden is meant to supplement their educational process as well. So they learn to garden and grow alongside their cooking. So we built this, well, it started off with a garden. We started off with a small strip because we wanted to test, because we were like, okay, if we want to spend so much money, if we spend all that money to grow, if it doesn't work, it's going to be a waste of money. So we started with a small strip in the first year. This is a picture of all the girls that was helping on this project, as well as the colleagues from ESR. So if you can see here, this is very urban lah. This is in Jalan Hang Jebat, which is as urban as it gets. It's right smack in the center of town. Behind is a very derelict Plaza Rakyat, which has been abandoned for 30 years. But very lucky to get this space again. So we started off with this small strip and we just grew herbs. And with these herbs, they supplemented the cafe because the YWCA has a small cafe and their canteen as well that cooks for the students. So we started off with this. We only grew herbs, and after a year, it went well. So then we got Think City to fund the other side, which was to expand. This is a picture of the girls harvesting. Expand the project here. So if you can see on the screen right now, this is basically the overall map of the space and how we planned it out. The bottom part, if you look at the yellow bits, that was the strip that we started off with. And then we expanded it to the green color strips, which is all these garden beds that we wanted to grow leafy vegetables and different gardens. And then at the back, again, it's supposed to be rows of fruit trees. So this was how we planned it. We started off with things that would be of use to the kitchen, then things that would be of use, but it takes longer time to grow. And then the further part is also then things that take an even longer time to grow, because then you have to walk very far and you can't walk very far every day. That's how we planned this urban farm space. So then we implemented it, and this has been running for almost 2 years now. And you can look up the project on Instagram under VTalk Urban Farm. I'm not sure if we have a lot of pictures on this deck itself, but you can see the pictures of things that are growing, but it's doing well. But over MCO, because the students couldn't work on it, then it had to be abandoned for a couple of months because nobody could get to this garden. So now we're in the process of rejuvenating it again. So, I mean, that's a lot of our case studies, so I hope I didn't bore you too much, but we've got maybe about 15 minutes more. I want to take you through the realities. I think this is actually the fun part lah, and the realities of urban farming that we feel people should know before they embark on such a journey. So a lot of times when people want to start urban farming, they send us pictures like this from Pinterest, from Google Images, and they're like, yeah, okay, I want an urban farm like this. But when you see pictures like this, you really need to take it with a pinch of salt, because pictures like these are taken when the garden is at its best. But for urban edible gardening and urban farming, plants have a certain life cycle, and at some point they will die. So it won't look like this forever. It will look like this maybe for a season, and after that it will die off or pests will come and eat it up. So it will just not look like this forever, and you need to manage your expectations when you're doing a plan for an urban farm. On the right side of this picture is also a couple of herb gardens that people like to send to me. So these herb gardens are using plants that are also not very local. A lot of pictures that you find online are actually European based or Western, and they're completely different climate. So there are not a lot of references on tropical plants on the internet. So you need to make sure that the type of references that you find should be tropical in nature. Otherwise, you'll be very disappointed. This one I wanted to show, yeah, the video is taking part. People also don't realize that plants die after a while. So this is an example. If you have a chili plant, the life cycle is it will grow from seed to seedling, it will flower on the left, and then it will grow fruit, your beautiful chilies on the right. But then after this, it will die. So people need to remember that, you know, these plants will die at some point. And that's just the life cycle, and you need to plan for that. Very morbid, but true. And this is a picture of pests that we took pictures of today. I just went for a site visit this morning to someone's garden, and she was showing us a curry plant. So pests are things that you will have to manage. They will come no matter how hard you try to avoid them. You need to learn how to live with them. You need to learn how to manage them. On the left side, this is a tortoiseshell beetle that only eats curry leaves. So if you have a curry leaf plant, eventually you may find this bug. And on the right is also another site that I grew these, helped to grow these cucumbers in, and they've already been mauled by God knows what pests, and pests will always come. So it's something that you need to make sure that you manage later on. Maintenance is also very essential when you're starting an urban farm or an edible garden. Pictured here is a basil plant. It's grown in a very small pot. but then it's growing taller, and as it grows taller, it's going to find it very hard to stand, and it's going to flop to the sides. So if you don't prune it, it will not be managed properly. So maintenance is also essential. And essentially, a good farm can only exist with a good farmer. So the farm is a reflection of you. And if you don't have so much time, don't create such a big farm, because the maintenance is all on you as well. You may be able to find robots later on when technology is better, but the farm again is a reflection of the farmer lah. So after all that doom and gloom, now I am happy to start putting in some happy thoughts and ways of how you can grow. So hopefully this is a bit more encouraging. But at least, I put you down a bit to the lowest expectation, and then you can climb up so that everything else will be very exciting from here on. So first off is understanding the typical life cycle of a plant. Okay, it comes from seeds. If you look at the first number one image, or cuttings, and then when it goes from seed or cutting, it goes into a seedling, which is the second picture. And then when it grows into a larger plant, you need to make sure you prune it or fertilize it. You need to feed your plant. And then it may grow into a flowering plant if it's a flower plant. And then it will fruit from the flower, and then you have to harvest it. And then it will die. And when it dies, then you harvest the seeds. So that's a typical life cycle of a fruiting vegetable that you may grow in your urban farm. But there are also other plants that are perennials that don't go through this life cycle and can grow for a longer time. For instance, your pandan, your lemongrass, daun kadok, these are things that don't die off after one cycle lah. So those are things that you can look out for to grow instead as well. So first off, you should choose plants that are suitable for a climate. This is an example of two different types of basil. One grows well here, one doesn't grow well here. Italian basil, a lot of nurseries sell it, but it may not do very well here. It's a bit more susceptible to fungus and all that. On the right side, you have Thai basil, which does amazingly well. So if you're choosing between two basils, choose a more local variety. Again, seeds also have an expiry date. A lot of times people ask us, when is it going, or whether they can still use it. They bought it from 5 years ago. Well, all seeds have an expiry date because they're also food items in a sense lah, and they can't last forever. So when you're buying seeds, look at the expiry date on the back. If they have an expiry date already, sometimes you can just try and grow it, just chuck it aside. If it grows, great. If it doesn't, then you can move on lah and try different other seeds. But try to sow before the sow by date. In choosing seeds, people also always have this question of heirloom versus hybrid versus GMO. Essentially, heirloom seeds are seeds that may not be a commercial crop, but maybe some people have grown on the side. It's not a very famous crop, but it may have very interesting properties. So for example, you can see here this corn, right? Typically, we're exposed to yellow corn, or maybe at most white corn, but actually corn, they've got so many different varieties of different colors, but it may not taste very nice. So commercially, they're not propagated so much. So you may be able to find like interesting varieties that people have forgotten about, which is okay to grow as well. And you can actually make your own varieties with breeding plants, but that's a story for another day now. So heirloom variety seeds are okay to use. It's just that they may not serve the purpose that you want. Hybrid seeds are, if you look in nurseries, you will find hybrid seeds quite easily. Sometimes people get scared about hybrid seeds, but actually hybrid seeds are okay to use if you know what to expect. Essentially, to me, how I explain hybrid seeds is, if you want to have a Chindian person, you need to have a Chinese person and Indian person to mate and create a Chindian person. If you make two Chindian people, eventually you will maybe not get Chindian people, you will get maybe a different mix. It's not a racial or racist remark. This is just trying to give you an example of how hybrids work lah. So again, with plants, if you're making a hybrid plant, when you get an F1 hybrid, it may be the combination of two different strains of varieties. They've mixed it to create this F1 strain. But then if they want to create this F1 strain again, and if they want to mix that the second generation cannot be the same as this generation again. So they may come out different, and they may come out a bit unstable in terms of the plants lah. If you want to replicate the same F1 plant, you may not be able to do that. So that is the concept of hybrid seeds. So if you're buying hybrid seeds, you can grow it, but in the second generation, you may not have the same quality as the first hybrid generation that you've grown before. Slightly complicated, but hopefully that was somehow understandable, but you can ask questions later lah. GMO seeds, again, people are worried about getting GMO seeds, but actually, to be honest, farmers have been GMOing things for a long time. It's just that the time frame that they've used to modify crops have been way longer compared to now, because now they can change the genes a bit faster. This is probably not the best scientific way of explaining it. But again, GMO is probably not something that you have to be worried just yet if you're doing on a small scale, because usually GMO crops are commercial crops like cotton, corn, canola, or maybe even oil palm at some point, because it takes a lot of investment to do or to modify a crop even. So things like your sawi, your pachai, most likely not GMO lah, so you don't have to worry there anyway. So I'm missing a picture here, but when you're preparing your vegetable beds, you need to make sure that you have a lot of sunlight. This picture is missing, but I will go on to the next picture. You need to make sure you have a lot of sunlight. Shuada was talking earlier about growing indoors. Indoors is very hard unless you have UV lights that you can install in your space. But you need to make sure that you have a lot of sunlight. And these are some examples of garden beds that you can install outside in full sunlight, so that your plants will be able to grow. If you have plants growing in partial sunlight, you can see that they won't be very happy. So full sunlight is always the best. Ornamental plants are different. Edible plants, you need to make sure that they have enough sunlight so that they can produce enough food for themselves. The third thing is soil. So soil is something really important. You should invest a lot of money in good soil. There are a lot of different mixes that you can do, and that's again a story for another day. But the simple mix that we do is, if you buy simple topsoil from the nursery, you add compost and you add a good amount of cow manure or manures in order to fertilize your plants. Because when you're growing, the soil itself is meant to be a structure to hold the roots, but the compost and the cow manure is to provide nutrients and to provide ingredients for your plants to actually make food in a sense. So the soil itself may not hold any nutrients, but the nutrients are in the manure and the compost. So that part is very important when you're studying your soil mix. This is an example of what soil should look like. So if you have soil that's moist and nice, sometimes in newly developed residential areas, you get very clayey soils and you may not be able to grow in that. So you need to modify your soil to make sure that you have a good texture and structure that can hold nutrients and to hold moisture. So the middle picture is what it should look like. The left one is really bad because it's flooding already, and on the right is underwater. So technically, if you're mixing your own soil, that's roughly what it should look like. And I'm going to skim through this because I want to leave some time for Q&As. But this is just going through planting. So when you're planting seeds also, you can either sow direct or you can sow in trays. And if you sow direct, you're using really large seeds and you can do it directly into the ground. But if you're using expensive seeds, most likely you would put it in a tray first, like how these guys are doing, and then only transplant it in the ground so that you can make sure that you have the best seeds possible growing, and they don't get eaten by birds, if you sow directly into the ground. And then the care part is also important if you're looking at watering. Watering is a really important part of gardening and your urban farming journey. And you can use, if you're doing manually, you can use simple things like watering cans on a small space. But if you're going to do a really large space for an urban farm, then you need to look into irrigation systems. And you can install these systems, they're on timer. But the best is if you do something sort of like this one in the middle, which is drip, so you don't waste water. If you're using a sprinkler irrigation on the right side, you're churning and spraying a lot of water, but some of it may actually evaporate and then not go directly into the ground. Because what you're watering is actually soil, and the water is absorbed by the roots, not the top of the plant. So you want to make sure that the water goes into soil instead of the leaf. And a couple more slides. This is an example of a shade house or a safe house. Sometimes we get questions from people to whether they should start a greenhouse. But in Malaysia, it's just ridiculous to start a greenhouse because a greenhouse is more for a cold climate where you need to keep it warm. So if you're doing a greenhouse and it's going to be all glass, it's just going to be this really hot space. And your plants may get fried. So what you want is a shade house because you want to keep the bugs out and you still want the ventilation to be in the space. So this is what you can set up if you're doing a space and you want to keep bugs out. And just a couple more things. In terms of fertilizing, it's really important to add food into your garden or into your vegetable beds. And the difference between natural fertilizers and synthetic fertilizers is natural fertilizers like goat dung, cow dung, chicken dung, they release nutrients very slowly, whereas synthetic fertilizers, they do it very quickly. It's kind of like eating vitamins. It has a specific nutrient and it releases it quickly. They're not necessarily bad if you're using synthetic fertilizers, but the excess of these fertilizers may run off into your water table and it may create an excess of nutrients in a pond and then create an algae bloom and then kill all the fish in this pond area. If you look at, I think, maybe, I'm not sure whether the red tide is associated with this, but it could be one of the effects or a similar effect to excess fertilizer. And the last thing that actually is important in your fertilization is also microbes. Microbes kind of help by, when you're adding microbes into your soil, microbes will sort of unlock the potential of these nutrients and enable plants to absorb these nutrients that are in the soil. So you may not need a lot of microbes, but if you look at it and if you find it in the nurseries and the garden shops, they will be useful and they will be able to help your plants bloom better in your growing process. And actually the final slide in this is pest management. Where if you find bugs in your urban farming journey, the best way is actually to manually remove it from your plants. And if that doesn't work, then only you look at using natural repellents such as garlic sprays, chili sprays, because you don't want to implement it too quickly because you may repel other bugs also. So this is a combination of how you can manage your pests. And another thing is also if you see bugs like ladybirds and praying mantis and spiders, these are actually plants that, bugs that kill other pests that are invading your plants. So these are good bugs to have and you want to try to encourage these bugs by, you can plant certain things that encourage these bugs to come, like certain flowers, and you can look them up. But lastly, if you really cannot manage your pests or if they are becoming a big problem, then the last resort is really to destroy by just burning, cut them, burn them, put them aside, and then you have to start afresh. So that is how you can manage your pests in that sense. So that is pretty much the end of my slides. I think the rest is not so, shared window. So that is pretty much the rest of my slides. And maybe we've got about 5 more minutes to take up some Q&A. Sorry, I've taken up so much of the deck time, but Shuhada, maybe we can start opening up the floor for questions because it's been...
All right.
Yeah, sorry. Someone's asking about something.
Waiting for you to finish.
Sorry. Yes, it's taking a long time. Sorry, my decks are very long and I try to cover as much as possible. But yeah, maybe we can go through some Q&As and questions.
All right. So I see some questions here in our Zoom chat room because I'm also checking on Facebook because we're live on Facebook.
I see. Okay.
So I'll go accordingly whichever. Question from Coco. She asked, "What are your views on hydroponic planting?"
Okay. For hydroponic planting, we haven't used it extensively in our growing practices because we are very pro soil. We feel that soil is a non-renewable resource, so we always want to replenish soil as much as possible. Hydroponic growing is a different system altogether that uses water and chemical nutrients that is very specific. So I feel that hydroponic farming is good for commercial growing of certain crops. If you're looking to farm lettuces, small leafy greens, hydroponic is very efficient because you don't need a lot of space. You can be very specific in your nutrient use, and the result is very promising because you put in this and you will know what to get. Whereas soil-based, maybe you may find that some of your nutrients have run off in the soil and then you need to replenish and you can't tell what nutrients are in the soil again. So that is the difference between soil-based farming and hydroponic farming. So if you're looking to do hydroponic farming, you can, but it's just that you're limited in the kinds of plants that you can grow. And I would say do it only if you're looking to grow commercially. Yeah. Sorry, there's a car that's reversing in front of you, but hopefully that's not too noisy.
Okay, going to the next question. Actually, I saw another question that popped in Facebook, so I'll ask that one that came first. From Annabelle, she asked, she said, "Hi there. Thank you so much for your valuable sharing. I have a question on the incorporation of composting bins in the residential building like condominium. Is there any tips or case study on how the composting can be done with such a big community as nowadays high-rise buildings are densely populated?"
Yep. So for composting, yeah, that's a tricky one, especially if you're dealing with a composting system for a whole condominium because you're dealing with, I don't know, more than 30, 50, 100, 200 residents at a time. So composting within a condo like that, I think it will be very limited in terms of what you can compost because the space to resident ratio is just too big. And I think in that case, probably you can just compost within your own home. You can start a small composting unit. Like I think we showed one picture earlier of a composting system when we designed. You can do something like that so everyone can compost a bit in their own home. And then once they have access, if they can then pour it out into a community area, and then basically you're pouring compost back into the community area that's already composted. I think that's an easier way to manage it collectively because if you try to manage 300 people's waste in one space, it will be very tricky. So if everyone can just manage a bit in their own homes and then collectively put the finished compost, because composting itself may smell if you don't do it right, but finished compost should just be like dirt. So if you can pour it into a community area and collect it, then I think it's a bit more manageable that way. Another alternative is to also maybe engage with a waste collector that does composting and that can collect all the organic matter and turn it into compost somewhere else. So I feel that that could be an interesting business opportunity for someone to implement because not a lot of people are doing it. And I think it is worthwhile paying for if someone has a business to offer in that arena.
So the next question is, what is the best practices for vertical farming?
For vertical farming, yes. So we always get asked this question for vertical farming. For us, when we ask about vertical farming, we prefer to just basically grow beans and let it creep vertically because that's easier. The beans are going to creep up anyway. We don't have to go and hang them. And when you do vertical farming, the typical concepts or design systems that you see these days are stacks, which are okay, but then they may cost quite a bit to implement. They're not very cheap to implement. And sometimes maintenance is tricky because you have to have a proper irrigation system that goes from the top to bottom. And that irrigation sometimes gets stuck. The pipes get stuck because there's excess growth in the pipes and then it doesn't water properly. Then you end up with dead plants at the top and at the bottom. So if you're doing vertical farming, make sure you go with a system with someone who is going to help you with maintenance if anything goes wrong, or just grow beans on a trellis and let them creep up, and then you can have really nice vertical spaces as well for growing.
There's quite a few from the Q&A box here.
Okay. Yeah.
Is there any difference growing perennial plant in urban farming method?
Is there any difference between perennial plants in urban farming methods? Urban farming meaning in pots? Well, okay, so perennial plants, right? Typically your lemongrass, pandan, daun kaduk. Usually people, back in the day, they would just grow it in their backyard because everyone had bigger backyards and spaces like that. In this day and age, of course, more people are staying in condos, in apartments, and you can actually still grow these same plants in pots. So technically, it's very similar. You're just taking it from the land and putting it in a pot. You just need to make sure that your pot is the correct size for your plant. So if you're growing pandan, if you have this pot, then your pandan is limited to growing at this size lah. It will be proportionate to the pot size. If you have a bigger pot, then you can grow a bigger pandan plant because it can have more roots and it can expand further. So choose the right pot, a right size, and make sure that you water it daily and so that it can grow. But yeah, that's pretty much the difference, I would say. Not a lot, just the size of the pot.
Right.
Yeah.
So from Umi Junit, she asked, how do you make sure the soil can provide enough nutrition in one bed or lot?
How do you make sure that the bed has enough nutrients?
Make sure the soil can provide enough nutrients in one bed.
Okay. So for nutrients, actually, people forget this, but you have to fertilize your garden or your beds every week or every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks. It's actually a consistent thing that you need to do. You can't just plant it and then expect it to go forever lah. The fertilization is actually a consistent thing that you have to do in perpetuity. So sometimes we call it lah fertilizer Fridays, then we remember, okay, it's Friday, it's time to fertilize. And you don't need to put a lot. You just need to put enough or a little to make sure that your plants are happy enough. And you can start to observe different things. Like if your plants start to yellow or you can see that they're droopy or not doing well, then you can try to add a bit more fertilizer and observe and see whether your plants are doing okay or if there's a change. If there's no change, then you have to try to troubleshoot other things already. Maybe it's not the nutrient thing. Maybe it's a pest problem. Maybe it's a fungus problem. So there'll be quite a bit of troubleshooting to do when you're growing in soil compared to hydroponic lah. Because hydroponic is just the nutrient, the water, and but in soil there may be other factors to play. I think another difference also I wanted to talk about hydroponic and growing in soil is that growing in hydroponic, growing just in water, the taste might be slightly different. This is according to a chef lah, not to me, because I'm not that great a cook. But there's a chef that I know, and he says that the taste, there's a difference because the hydroponic plants are slightly more watery in taste, slightly, but it depends on how you like it lah.
So next question from Hibita, your neighbor.
Hello.
How come my coriander, basil, roots cuttings from the supermarket bought stocks don't grow? We just brought off.
Okay. So basil cuttings, maybe the ones that you got from supermarket are not high enough. So when you're taking cuttings, you need to make sure that they're quite solid cuttings lah. So if you take the ones at the top, obviously if you're harvesting from the supermarket, most likely it's the fresher, younger ones, and it's very soft. So they may not be mature enough to be able to be propagated via as a stem lah. So you need to make sure that your cuttings are actually of a nice sturdy stem rather than a soft lembeki one. So it depends on your luck on what kind of cuttings you get. Again, yeah, the supermarket ones may be fresher and younger, so not mature enough to propagate via cutting.
Yeah. From Alice, right? Alice Community, right? She said, "Hi there.
Hi.
I've seen some people germinating seeds in wet tissue before moving into soil. Is this a good practice, or do you recommend sowing directly?"
So I would recommend sowing directly into a seedling mix. So why plants or seeds can germinate through tissue paper? Because actually seeds just need moisture. They just need water to be able to germinate. But once they germinate, they need to latch on to soil structure so that they can bloom and blossom nicely. So for me, I would prefer to germinate from soil so that they can form a nice root structure. And then when I can transplant them into a bed, it will be more sturdy. If I do them in tissue paper, then it will be a bit lembek, and then it will be very hard for me to transfer it over lah. But again, of course, this depends on what type of seeds you're growing. But my preference would be to start them from a seedling tray or a good enough soil mix, then transplant them or direct into the bed, depending again on the seeds.
Then moving on to questions from the chat, from Basil. It's just a statement: hydroponics, urban farming versus aquaponics farming. This question. So if you have anything to say about that.
Hydroponic versus, sorry?
Aquaponics.
Oh, hydroponic versus aquaponic. I guess aquaponic is one level up from hydroponic, because then you have fishes with your system as well. So for those who don't know, a hydroponic system relies completely just on water and chemical nutrients, whereas an aquaponic system is a system where it has fish. The fish will poo, the poo will feed the plants, and there's a cycle over there that is a bit more closed loop lah. So yeah, I'm happy with aquaponics. I haven't personally implemented an aquaponic system, but I know people who have. If you can find the right balance, that is a good thing to have. For me, it's hard for me to troubleshoot aquaponic system because I don't have that expertise. So I still prefer doing soil completely, so we have a pond separately and we have soil bed separately. Sometimes we take the fish poop, and then we put it on the other side. So that is our very manual aquaponic system. But if you have bought a good aquaponic system, then yeah, I think it's a good system to have. Again, limited in what you can grow also, maybe because of the nutrients.
Also from Basil asks, how can one make your own organic pest repellent? What ingredients are recommended?
Organic pest repellent. Do I have it here? I don't have it here right now. So we actually sell this neem spray on our shop. So if you look at all our online shop, you can look at all our stuff. But basically, you can make sprays out of neem. So a lot of neighborhoods, actually, you find neem trees. If you look properly, a lot of neighborhoods have neem trees. You can boil this into a tea, and then you mix it with a bit of soap, and that can be your neem spray, because once you spray the plants with it, it will sort of like have a very bitter layer on top of the plants. So when bugs come there, they get a bit repelled by the bitter taste lah. So neem is one repellent that you can use. Chili garlic sprays are also good to use. Again, you boil your chili and garlic into a very, very diluted soup. You mix a bit of soap, and then you have your chili garlic spray. It creates like a very gross concoction on the plants that will repel bugs. So these are some sprays that you can try. Quite commercially available also. Neem is very easily available. Again, you can buy them on our shop. But chili garlic is a bit harder to get because they cannot last for so long. It will turn into like fermented chili paste after a while. We've tried before. So something better that you make yourself lah, if you can boil these things at home.
Also from Coco again, how did you manage to grow banana tree in your designer pot? Is it possible to grow big trees in big pots? Can I grow neem in big pot like yours?
Okay. So you can grow neem in the biggest pot we have, I guess, is about 55, half a meter wide. You can grow in that pot. It's just that it will never grow so big lah, because it will be limited to the pot size. It will never be able to grow into a large tree, which is, I guess, okay if you're not planning to have a lot of neem. A small neem plant is fine. What was the banana tree? So I've had one of my friends in Hong Kong has grown banana trees in large pots, and she's been very successful. So you can grow bananas. Maybe you have to find a variety that is a dwarf variety. There's a smaller one, and it should be able to grow in a large pot. And that can be your little experiment. I'm just not sure how well it will propagate lah, because bananas, they will have anak on the side, right? So whether they can come out again and have baby anaks in a pot might be a bit tricky lah, or stranded. Maybe not so big. But you can try. If you have the right fertilizers, it could be possible. Yeah.
Try and then update us now.
Yeah.
All right, and then from Naraini, Oh, this is an interesting question. Which pollinators commonly pop in the edible garden? Do bees appear in your garden?
Ah, yes, we get a lot of bees. We get a lot of kalulut. Sometimes the kalulut forms nests in our drain holes, random places. So we get a lot of kalulut. We get a lot of bees as well. So amazingly, that they still come for, I don't know where their hive is, but they're still around. Um, Praying mantis, I guess we get this like tiny the
The black
ant,
one, right?
the
Yeah.
small tiny one sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the amount of bugs we get a lot lah, but I'm not so privy to the names of the actual bugs. But we have enough pollinators. We also have a lot of cats and chickens, so sometimes they catch out the plants. They don't pollinate the plants; they just help to fertilize the plants.
For others, information, celluloid is stingless, so they are harmless, so they don't worry about them.
Yeah.
And then going into the Q&A box. Okay, this is quite quiet now.
Some.
From Philip, full sunlight is good for the plant.
Yes, full sunlight is the best. Full sunlight is the best for your plants. And if you have um, if you have too much sun, so some people are scared that their plants get burnt lah. It's like too hot, right? At least you can then control the amount of sun. Like if you feel that okay, it's a bit hot, you can add shade cloth on top. So it's better to start with full sunlight and then reduce it later on. Because if you start with like partial and try to increasing it is the more expensive method. So always go with full sunlight for the option where possible. Makes a lot of difference in terms of growth. Sunlight is the way plants process their food and photosynthesis happens with sunlight. So with no sunlight, then they cannot make their food properly. Yeah.
Right. I saw one very interesting question in Facebook from Daniel Lim. Hi, Ms Low.
Hi.
Everyone saying hi. Is urban pollution impact is urban pollution impact a lot on the growth of plants? If yes, do you use any technologies or methods to regulate pollution?
Wow. Okay, I haven't scientifically monitored pollution in our growing lah, so I can't really say. But I remember last year maybe when it was hazy, then there was not a lot of sunlight, right? So then the plants seemed to be a bit sad and they didn't grow as fast lah. I think there was a difference in terms of haze lah, because haze limited the amount of sunlight that we could get. Other pollution like chemical pollution, we're not affected so much because we don't use chemical fertilizers anyway. Fogging, sometimes in our area, we're a bit worried because it might kill some of the beneficial insects around the area, but it hasn't been drastic enough for us to observe and monitor lah. Yeah.
Also from Facebook, from Bohrita, if we are new in growing, which are the top 3 easiest vegetables to begin with?
If you're new, okay, the top 3 easiest. Number 1 is kangkong. So you try to grow kangkong first. If kangkong really cannot, then you need to rethink a bit, like, because that's the easiest thing to grow. Second thing is ulam raja is also very easy to grow, super easy. Third thing is maybe pandan. Pandan also super easy to grow. So these are some very easy to grow plants that you can start off with. And then when you're a bit more confident and understand how plants grow a bit more, then you can move on to things like tomato plants or fruiting plants like chili, eggplant. Those are the level 2, level 3 plants lah, I would say.
Should be like a guide, a level 1 plant.
Yeah, we need to do that.
Next.
Yeah.
Right, from Noor, how do I know when to collect the seeds of the fruit? For example, chili.
Okay, so if you want to collect seeds, normally when you are growing to save the seeds, you have to let the fruit mature on the plant, which also means you need to let it dry and die on the plant. If you harvest it too young, then the seed is not mature enough. So even if you get a seed, it may not be viable lah. So usually to harvest seeds, they need to dry and mature on the plant. So sometimes it's quite sad lah. If you want to have if you want to save the seeds, basically you need to let your plant die. Usually for fruiting plants like chili, tomato, brinjal lah.
Right. I think so. I can already take like one last question.
Okay.
My seedlings will get thinner near the leafy part and then break. Is it too much for me?
Thinner near the leafy part, then break. If your seedlings are getting thinner near the leafy part, it could be that they are growing too thin. And when they grow too thin, it's because they don't have enough sunlight, because they are stretching themselves as a baby to look for sunlight. And when they stretch themselves, they get thinner and longer, and then they just fall off. So it could be that you're not getting enough sunlight. So you should put them somewhere with more direct sunlight lah, so that they can create their food and grow bigger. So yeah.
I think so. There's one more that I can. This one is the last one.
Okay.
What soap you add to the neem repellent?
Yeah. Neem spray repeller. Yeah. So the soap you can add like a simple like your hand soap, a liquid soap, non-toxic soap, because the soap is actually just to make sure when you spray it on a plant, it can stick to the plant, and it will wash off after a while. But you know, at least it can stick for at least a week lah until it rains. So try use a nice soap. Don't use like a washing detergent soap or anything. Some hand soap, non-toxic soap will be good. Yeah, just a bit. Yeah.
All right. We still have time for one more.
Okay.
From Facebook, there's from Annabelle again. Is dragon fruit seed suitable to grow indoor environment like in the office, where there's very minimal sunlight penetration? As I recall, seeing the dragon fruit is favorable under artificial light, but I tried planted once and it didn't like.
I think commercially there are some people growing dragon fruit seeds as baby plants, but personally I haven't grown it by seeds indoors before. We've tried growing dragon fruit by cutting. Somebody has given us a stem, but it took a very long time to fruit. So after 2 years, we were like, don't want it anymore. But so sorry, I cannot answer your question in a very straight manner. But I think dragon fruit will most likely require a lot of sunlight. You can probably germinate seeds indoors, but once they start to grow leaves, they would usually need to go outside to absorb sunlight to make their food. So sunlight is very important for plants.
Right. That's all for questions. You don't have any more questions. All right. So thank you. Thank you, Shao-Lyn, so much for a very lovely talk. And I learned a lot already about all this design, urban farming design. All right. And also thank you everyone for staying with us. Next week, we will be learning about butterfly gardens. Tunggulah next week. All right. So I'm going to share. Can I share screen? I'm going to share screen on our QR code for feedbacks. Hold on, yeah. So yeah, so this one very pretty one page. So it will be very helpful for you guys to scan and give us your thoughts on the series. We'd like to know what's on your mind, any suggestions, and also improvements in any aspect we'd like to know with you. And before we end, do follow ESR on their social media pages and also website if you'd like to get more updates for ESR or buy all the repellent and other. And also somewhere in Facebook, someone asked about t-shirts. I think so on your website as well. I think already.
Yeah.
All right, and also do follow us, the Urban Biodiversity Initiative, on our 3 giant social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter also, at UB_MY, UBI_MY. Also, if you're interested to learn or would like to educate other people, if you're an educator, do check out our website, UBI's website, ubi-my.com. In our website, we have plenty of urban wildlife resources for you guys. So probably you might come across some of these pest species on the website. So you can learn a lot about like urban plants, urban animals, articles on plants and food, urban biodiversity garden, also on wildflowers of in Malaysia. All right, so thank you again everyone for being here. Sudah cukup time. So also yeah, again thank you so much, Shao-Lyn. See you guys next week.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
It was helpful. Bye.